Well, good afternoon. I'm not sure if you know me. I'm Chris Cyphers, the Provost at SVA, and I have the pleasure of hosting this evening's, or actually this afternoon's event. I want to first acknowledge Academic Affairs Manager Michael Severance for taking on the task of organizing this afternoon's event. Thank you, Michael. And our moderator, Molly Heinz, who I'll introduce in a moment, and our 5 panelists leading today's discussion. And I want to thank all of you in the audience who turned out this afternoon despite the weather. I assume it's still raining, maybe not. From the last 25 years or so of the, from the last 25 or so years of the 20th century to the present, computer technology has continually altered the landscape of the visual arts professions and the education of its practitioners, along with nearly every aspect of modern life. Each evolution in the development of these technologies has engendered a sense of excitement and concern, with some taking the position that technology opens up new possibilities for practice and the education of visual artists. Others have taken a dimmer or more measured view regarding the computer and its exponentially increasing capabilities as nails in the coffin of craft and traditional methods of making art. And so it has gone for nearly, more than half a century. That is, until the last couple of years, when the steady march of the microprocessor's ability to aid in the work of humans, supposedly, turned into something that seems to have caught us unawares, and at least initially conjured up in our collective imagination a sense of fear and loathing. It's generative artificial intelligence, generative AI. And I will pause for a moment to note that things like internet optimization and self-parking cars are but a couple of examples that foretold the moment we find ourselves at now. Yet, seemingly overnight, a computer connected to the internet, responding to a handful of prompts using AI applications such as Dream Studio or Midjourney, can produce largely realistic images. And something called ChatGPT, with which I'm sure you're all familiar, can just as easily generate cogent and grammatically correct, albeit soulless prose, using similar methods of issuing prompts. The possibilities for AI are seemingly limitless, as are the opportunities for nefarious activities, and there is no putting this genie back in the bottle. AI will only grow more and more sophisticated, and while this technology has the potential to do good, it also signifies a turning point that many of us are unprepared for. The sheer power of AI makes the Adobe suite of imaging products look like a box of crayons. I thought that would have gotten a bigger laugh, but I don't know. All right, there we go. Thank you. For art and design educators, including those who teach in the liberal arts, AI creates a serious conundrum. Will this technology render obsolete the skills we teach our students, thus eliminating or substantially altering whole categories of art and design practice and its attendant jobs? What are the implications for those who teach art, history, literature, and the rest of the humanities and social sciences? Do we have an obligation to our students, many of whom are in this room this evening, to expose them to the potential AI has to augment their work? And how can we find ways to incorporate AI in its various permutations into the curriculum and in a way that is useful and responsible? At SVA, generative AI has been received by our faculty and students with a mixture of enthusiasm and deep suspicion. My office was asked last year by our department chairs to craft an institutional policy around AI. The resulting policy was, well, a non-policy, or rather, we deferred to the individual studio and academic departments to create their own policies. 1 year on, this institutional approach has proved woefully inadequate. My colleagues want more guidance and an intellectual framework within which to discuss AI as it relates to curriculum development, pedagogy, and institutional philosophy and policy. An advisory committee of chairs, faculty, leadership from IT and the Office of Learning Technology has been established by the Office of the Provost to address this topic. This evening's panel is the first among what will be several community-wide forums whose outcomes will inform SVA's approach to, quote, managing AI in a way that is ethical and responsible, while at the same time introducing our students to the possible applications of AI to their creative and intellectual endeavors. And with that, I'm pleased to turn things over to this evening's moderator, Molly Heinz, Chair of SVA's MA Program in Design, Research, and Writing. Thank you.
Working. Oh, there we go. Here we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. As Chris said, I'm the chair of the MA Design Research, Writing, and Criticism program here at SVA. I am operating out in the world as an editor and journalist. I am not an expert in technology. I do spend a lot of time listening and asking questions, though, which is what I'll do today. Sometimes I ask strategically naive questions. You know, the dumb question can actually get you pretty far sometimes. Today, I may ask them some authentically naive questions because, I am really learning about AI day to day with my students, and I'm really happy to have this great group of thinkers who I think is a bit more advanced than I am in their understanding and knowledge of AI to talk with us today, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. First, I wanted to lay out some definitions and parameters for today's conversation because this topic is indeed so vast and dynamic. Generative AI, as Chris was saying, has really riveted the world's attention because beyond being able to perceive and categorize data, which artificial intelligence has been doing for many years, generative AI can use that information to create something new. So when we use the term AI in the context of this conversation today, we'll be talking about generative AI or Gen AI, unless we note otherwise. But even if Gen AI is a creator, per our definition, can we call it creative? At a school that educates artists and designers, how can we use Gen AI as part of learning and as part of the creative process? And that's what really warrants special consideration. So students, faculty, and staff at School of Visual Arts are constantly creating, and the ways they are creating are varied and diverse, and that's what also makes it challenging. It's because SVA is a really big tent, and everybody is operating in different ways. So given the diversity of how and what we create at SVA, and given the pace at which Gen AI tools are evolving, how do we engage with AI as an institution? Where do we place the guideposts in this shifting terrain? And what are the guideposts even around this? How do they relate to SVA core values as an institution that supports the education of artists, designers, and creators, as well as the work they go on to do out in the world? So this conversation we'll have for the next hour or so will aim to speak to some of these questions, or at least offer some food for thought. And after I introduce our panel, we'll move into our discussion and then leave the last 15 minutes or so for questions from the audience. All right. So our panelists are approaching the subject of generative AI as educators, but also from different points of view and realms of professional experience. And I'm going to, I'll take it from my left here. Eric Coriel is a digital strategy director at SVA's Visual Arts Press and a faculty member teaching the course Artist as Activist. He is also a multidisciplinary artist with degrees in philosophy and sculpture. Linda Holliday is the founder and CEO of the design tech firm Citia, am I pronouncing that correctly? And an entrepreneur at the intersection of design, media, and tech. She's also on the faculty at SVA in the MFA Design Department. And we have Frank Martinez to the left of Linda. Frank is an attorney and the founder of the Martinez Group, specializing in the legal representation of designers and AI startups. In addition to being a patent examiner, Frank holds an MBA and is a former artist and designer himself. He's on the faculty of multiple programs here at SVA, teaching intellectual property law for designers to undergrads and graduate students. Then next we have Dr. Jeremy Cohen, a sociologist who studies and writes on critical theory, inequality, political sociology, the social history of art, and the sociology of education. He teaches on these subjects and on art and politics here at SVA, where he is director of the SVA Honors Program. All right, and then at the end, Mark Tribe, chair of MFA Fine Arts at SVA. Mark is an artist himself, and I have been to his recent exhibits. And he is a founder of Rhizome, the not-for-profit arts organization focused on born digital art and culture based here in New York City. So thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. Delighted to have you with us. All right, so I wanted to actually kick off with a video, just a short one, 2 minutes. So.
The world is beginning to change right before our very eyes, and it's basically divided into two schools of thought. There are pessimists who think AI poses a great threat to human creativity, and then optimists who see it as an extension of our creativity.
A lot of people think that all that AI could possibly do is to produce more of the same. This is a new collaborator, a new tool, a bit like the arrival of the camera on the scene. That really changed art. So I think there'll be art that will be just the same as it ever was, but there'll be new jobs out there.
It might be impossible to stop AI models from scraping her work, but with Nightshade, she can mess up the way they see it.
Nightshade is an attack. Nightshade is just saying, hey, if you take this without my consent, there might be consequences to that.
Zhao says the goal isn't to make AI models unusable. It's making companies pay for the artist's work.
They need to take in more human created content. And if they're going to do that, then they should pay for it. And so this is trying to encourage them, if you will, to do that.
Says young people don't view as education as just the education system. You know, they go to school, but they also learn on YouTube. They also push the boundaries of what school tells them they should or shouldn't do. When the school tells them they can't use ChatGPT, that's probably the first thing they'll go and do, because if the school doesn't want me to do it, I want to know why. And so they're experimenting. You know, even though ChatGPT by many schools was banned last year, more than half of all teenagers said they plan on using it to do their homework. And so it's important to recognize that young people, especially teenagers, aren't just going to do what they're told. They're often going to do what they're told not to do.
But that's the game. Whether it's globalization or industrialization or now artificial intelligence, the way of life that you are accustomed to is no match for the promise of more profits and new markets, which sounds brutal if you're a human. But at least those other disruptions took place over a century or decades. AI is going to be ready to take over by Thursday. And once that happens, what the is there left for the rest of us to do?
Time is not a terrible thing.
AI freeing us up to think about things at a higher level is going to help. It's going to give us our time back.
We'll be able to express ourselves in new creative ways.
You know, he's right. I've been thinking about this all wrong. It's not joblessness. It's self-actualizing me time.
So, well, it's Thursday. Jon Stewart referred to it. Yeah, I think he was actually referring to last Thursday because his video came out about 10 days ago. But I want to first say thank you to design research alum Brooke Vigood for helping me put together that video montage. I'll also take a moment to just say a thank you to alum Ida Benedetto, who's here in the audience, as well as SVA faculty member Alan Chachinov, who works with our department around AI, as well as our friend of the department, Pal Garcia, who is actually giving his own TED talk about AI next week, who've really, I think, helped me get up to speed and get oriented in this evolving universe of AI. So the first clip you saw was from a TED Talk by artist and curator Eileen Isagan-Skyers from a year ago, her TED Talk. The second clip was an interview with mathematician Marcus du Sautoy from 3 years ago. The NBC News clip about Nightshade was just from a couple of weeks ago. Hardy Partovi in the clip from the World Economic Forum in Davos as a tech entrepreneur and CEO of the education nonprofit code.org, and he was speaking just in February. And as I said, the Jon Stewart clip just came out about 10 days ago. So the speed at which generative AI is evolving is one of the many disconcerting issues in play, and it raises some fundamental questions about the production of knowledge and the way humans learn and create. And today we want to stay focused on education, but let's start here on our more existential mountaintop and try to surface some of the core questions that may offer us some footing, and over the next hour we'll work our way down to the classroom. So panelists, I may call on someone to kick off the discussion when I ask a question, but I also invite you to jump in and respond to one another. Ask your own questions if you like. I also have a handful of quotes that I'll be putting up on the screen. They're really intended to be points of information or provocations, and you are welcome to comment on them if you like. So let's start by talking about learning and creativity in the time of Gen AI. The quote I brought is from Kate Crawford, who is the author of a book called The Atlas of AI, Power Politics, and the Planetary Costs of Artificial Intelligence that came out in 2021. But she's a prolific writer and thinker around AI. And this quote says, "The first myth is that non-human systems, be it computers or horses, are analogs for human minds." So my first question, Linda, I'm going to direct it to you. How is the way humans learn different from how machines learn? In your opinion, how would you describe it?
So human intelligence is embodied, meaning that we get smart before we can talk. So a 2-year-old knows the difference between a dog and a cat. There's catness and there's dogness, and it's something we experience physically. So all of our senses, not just verbal or sight, are booting up this elaborate creature. It's not a machine, right? That sometimes people compare the brain to a computer, but the comparison would be better to make it to a neuron, because a neuron, there's 16 kinds of neurons in your eye, right? And there are 80 billion neurons in your head. So like they're all firing together in concerts all the time. They stop firing, they refire, they get associated. It's a very organic, dynamic system that's constantly processing inputs and adjusting. And a machine is more of a memorization kind of a device. And then this processing that they're calling neural nets has some aspect of neurology, but it is not a replica of neurology. It just shares a feature or two with neurology. So we know what we know because we've been alive, and including having emotion. That's a big part of decision making, and it's a big part of life. So those are things that the machine cannot do and can't understand. So we are, until further notice, quite different.
Yes, and when you say embodied, you're really talking about the neurons are taking in from all of the senses, that we have at our disposal. And if you read Kate Crawford's book, the horse referenced here is about a specific case of a horse known as Clever Hans in Germany around the turn of the century, who actually was taught to count, in theory, by his trainer, but in fact, sorry, this is a spoiler alert about Clever Hans, but he was perhaps taking in some of that training, but also taking cues that were really kind of the unconscious body language of the trainer and others around them, who would look excited or open their eyes wider or breathe faster when Hans was approaching the right answer. And that's how Hans knew to stop. So,
could I?
That's smart.
Please.
Could I jump in here real quick? Okay. Linda raises a significant issue here, is that the human aspect to learning and cognition. And one of the reasons that AI is so disruptive or so troubling to so many people is that it appears to be intelligent. And really, if I might use an analogy that Jeffrey Hinton used, I used some about a year ago. Imagine you gave a book to 10,000 people, a different book to 10,000 people. And when you were done finished reading that book, you instantly knew all the material that the other 999,000 people, or The other people read. It was immediately in your head. And that's what these AI engines are able to do. So they appear to be omniscient, they appear to be all-knowing, they appear to be cognizant, they appear to be sentient. And in reality, they're not. What they have is just a lot of information available very quickly, and it gives the semblance of human-like abilities. That's really what we're dealing with.
The horse example is perfect because I call it stupid dog tricks. Like humans are really good at a lot of things. We're terrible at memorizing numbers, for example. Most of us know 10 phone numbers. If you learn a new one, you forget an old one. It's a very fixed amount of memory in there. So when somebody can memorize a lot, they look superhuman to us, right? So we overvalue the things machines can do easily because they're often hard for us, so that we bestow superpowers on them when they can't actually tell what a cat is.
Right. Jeremy.
Yeah, I totally agree with what's been said. I think just a couple things that are relevant to this too, like even the name AI, in the sense, of what Frank was bringing up, the name AI is to some degree like questionable or, potentially deceptive, i.e., these are large language models. They're information processing systems. They've been called artificial intelligence in part to make us excited about them, to tie into science fiction fantasies, to visions of the future. But I think it's really an open question, of whether we should even allow, to some degree, what's a marketing term to be the term we use. I mean, that's why I'm kind of okay with usually I don't like acronyms, but it seems to me AI is okay to just use the acronym because it kind of takes out the question or the marketing ploy of intelligence. So that was one thing I want to say. The other thing, to Linda's point, I 100% agree. And another thing I just think is really important for human learning and what we think of as human learning is suffused with purpose or with value, which I think is not really something that we know of that any other creature out there can bring to the world. We have a kind of open-ended question of why we're doing what we're doing, and we can learn things to dominate others and to be destructive. We can learn things, what maybe the more noble history of humanity has shown is we can learn things to diminish our destructiveness, to diminish suffering. I think Theodor Adorno once said, the condition of truth is allowing suffering to speak. So I think that idea of we pursue our learning based on a sense of values, and we have to make decisions about sort of how to direct our minds, how to direct our time, how to direct our energy, how to direct our purposes. That, I think, is a really important aspect of human learning that's quite different from any other information gathering that is done that we know of.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. Well, let's take that to education, specifically, in school environment. There's been a longstanding approach of learn the rules so you can transcend them or break them. And, a traditional learning path is one where there's a methodical accumulation of skill that ultimately enables freedom for creativity, invention, and maybe even innovation. So if we're thinking about how systems of knowledge work and the building of knowledge works, Mark, I'll throw this one to you. How do you think that learning path could be impacted by AI, that kind of skills accumulation?
I'm going to punt on this one. I have no idea. Anybody else?
Yes.
Okay, go Frank.
Gladly. Okay. By way of demonstration, these two girls up here in the front, yes, I'm pointing at you, they're drawing. They're checking their phones. They're, for lack of a better phrase, they're multitasking. But that's the difference between human creativity, human activities, and AI. AI only responds to the input, to the prompt. It can only respond with the information it has. They're actively gathering new information, and they're incorporating it. Now, with respect to what we do when we teach and AI, my goal, and I've already done this with my class last term, I actually had two classes where the class was about ChatGPT and how to use ChatGPT, not just put in a prompt, but how to understand that the tool can be programmed via the prompt. You can control what you get. You can guide it. And once you understand the tool, then it becomes effective as like a pencil or an X-Acto knife in your kit. And one of the things that I like to do, and what I'm going to do this term and the following terms, is to create an environment and to assist the students in understanding how they can use this technology to help create, how they can use it to help themselves create illustration or to create photographs or to write a story. This last term, I conducted a survey of my students to understand how many were using ChatGPT or other forms of AI, how were they using it, how did they feel about it, and the results were kind of surprising. And I would like to extend the survey to the rest of the school, but I haven't heard back from David yet, so I don't know. But I think it can be a tool. I really think that we can use it effectively. I think it can be of great assistance to us. And as I was saying to Linda earlier, every one of you who's graduating is going to be asked, do you know how to use AI, or do you know how to use ChatGPT? I want my students to be able to say yes, and make that something that's part of what they offer to the world.
Can I just say, Frank, you're kind of keeping us in suspense. You said you were surprised by the results. Can you give us like a few hints?
Okay.
What surprised you?
Funny you should ask. Let's see. Well, it was a very small data set, very small set. I only had 48 students in the class. And so a full 39% of the students who responded are using AI. A full 73% of the students that responded are using it for research. 65% of the students are using it to write. 47% of the students trust AI as they are currently using it. 39% of the students indicated that they used AI, that they were not using AI for design ideation. And when asked whether the students used AI to modify or create versions of traditionally created work, i.e. painting, drawing, whatever, 24% responded that they did use it, 53% responded no, and 9% indicated maybe, which means, of course, they're using it.
Which of those responses
Students
surprised you?
Yeah, students being used, students. And then I went on to ask how they were using it. What device did they prefer? Did they work with laptops, desktops, whatever? Nuts and bolts stuff. But I'd like to develop this survey further and administer it to the rest of the school if I can get permission to do it. Because, I got a yes. I got a yes.
Thumbs up from the provost.
To hell with David.
Can I take a crack at your question?
Yes, please. Please, Eric.
So I think it's a great question, and it's one that affects all of us here, obviously. And I think the concern is how do we institute conditions such that students aren't using AI to shortcut any kind of discoveries or learning that would be formidable for their character and development at school and beyond. And I think we're in a very nascent stage of this technology, obviously. So there will be better tools that come along. But for now, I think that this comes down to character in a way. And I tell my students at the start of the class, it's going to be very hard for faculty members to be quote unquote like AI detectors. Although actually it's a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. But students kind of, to the students out here, like at the collegiate level and at the graduate level, have to decide what kind of student do you want to be. Do you want to be a student who's going to be relying on shortcuts? And is that going to be, how's that going to work out for you in the long run? Or are you going to be the kind of student who wants to understand? And we know that the path to understanding something truly fully and internalizing it is a long road. But that will pay off in the end, right? You'll be able to think more clearly. You'll be a better analytical thinker. You'll know the craft inside and out. Like these are the kinds of things that lead to a fulfilling career and also just make you, I think, a more valuable asset in society and the marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. So, but now the tooling is such that this is a choice that people have to make. I don't know that we have AI systems that are built around learning yet, as they can be and as I hope they will be. They're more about now giving the answer, so to speak, right? But there could be ways in which they are built more around discovery. I don't think that's happened yet. But for now, I think this is an individual choice, and students need to decide pretty early on, or pretty much right now, what kind of students they want to be.
Can I just add for personal creative development, I think there's a lot of value in learning how to do things that is permanent and gets applied to other realms. Like I say I can paint kind of because I can cook, or I can cook because I can paint, because there's a lot of similarities. You have something's forward, something's back, repetition, variation, right? There's like something to it. Learning to draw is really learning to see, right? So there's so many things you do that have, follow-on benefits inside that practice and outside that practice. And if we forego all of them, we're not going to become as rich mentally as if we do them. I don't want to do push-ups, but I want to be able to lift a suitcase, right? Or play tennis, right? So I do things to improve tennis that might not be very fun, like push-ups, because I understand the value of them. And I think a lot of, replacing a lot of the, what you might call repetition of being any kind of creative professional is tempting, but it may not be good for us.
Yes, excellent point. And, Eric, I also really like the point you made about sort of challenging students and asking them, well, why are you here, in the first place? And, I've found that with our current graduate students as well, who are ostensibly here for learning about research, writing, and criticism. And yeah, I think they're to some degree nonplussed about ChatGPT because, they're here to learn how to research and write and analyze their research through writing. And so, yeah, the shortcuts are not appealing at that level. All right, so let's move along a little bit. I'm putting a new quote up. Consultancy PwC estimated AI-related economic impact could reach 15.7 trillion globally by 2030, nearly the gross domestic output of China. That's reporter Kenneth Lee writing in Reuters in the end of January. And I'm putting that up as a kind of a preamble, perhaps, to maybe a discussion on power and agency. So, Frank, when you were talking about your results from your survey, you said that students, a lot of students, almost 50%, 40-something, trusted AI.
Yes, about, of the students that responded, about 43% trusted AI.
That was surprising to me.
Well, it's a small set. It's less than 50 students, so that may change when we get to survey more people, but I think what we'll find is that the demographic, the cohort will change. The students who are currently freshmen will embrace AI more than the students that I was surveying are seniors. So to them, ChatGPT is what, a year old maybe? And all these other AI tools. And the other issue with the AI tools is that to use them really effectively, you have to have some technical abilities. And this is an art school. I went to art school. I suck at math. So, I have a math tutor that I work with. I get a math beat down 6 hours a week, and I'm still struggling with it. So, as the tools get more sophisticated and easier to use, we will see deeper acceptance and deeper penetration. And what Linda was talking about earlier is this notion of it gets easy. You mentioned this earlier, that it gets easier. We get sloppy, we get lazy, and we let it do it for us. And you need to know how to draw. You need to understand color. You need to understand form and space. You need to understand all these things in order to be a good artist. It's just the foundation. And AI is not going to give you that. It's going to tell you what it is, but it can't do it.
Well, the reason I personally was surprised, I think based on kind of where I'm coming from, is that, and this is something I think we almost take for granted, is that the data used by generative AI contains bias. So, one should approach it skeptically. The algorithms that are the engine of generative AI, that is the code that is mining that data, also contains bias, and you can be equally skeptical of those algorithms. So, this has been established and acknowledged as one of the biggest issues, hurdles with AI, but I bring it up because I'd like us to discuss, the issues that are in play here, actually beyond bias, and we can download a chatbot app for free, or so it seems. Nothing's really free, is it? So my question is, what kind of critical awareness should a user bring to engagement with a generative AI tool? Who are you really working with, or maybe working for, unbeknownst to you? So I don't know who wants to take a stab at this one. Jeremy, maybe you can help pull back the curtain on some of the power dynamics.
Sure. I'm happy to at least start us off a little bit. I mean, there's a phrase, I forget who said it, but someone said if you get something for free, you're the product. It's not the product that you've downloaded. You are the product. And that has to do with, the fact that we should think about all the billions of dollars that are going into the investigation of AI, the development of these AI tools. We should think about what's the motivation behind that kind of investment. What are people putting their money into? What are people anticipating? What are people looking for? And I think, a couple of things are the collection of ever more of your data, of the data of every person in here, and data is a broad sense, like that includes, your personal likes, one's dislikes, one's activities, but also, one's art and one's creations and one's, attempts to shape the world. Like, these are very profitable things to collect and then bundle and then sell to advertisers who want to know ever more in detailed ways how to sell all of us things. So I think that's one aspect which is really important for thinking about, who is the product for. The other thing, of course, is, that part of the investment in these activities is the design for increasing efficiency. And what does increasing efficiency often mean in our society? It means people losing their jobs and, resources and power and money going, hoovering up towards the top of the income distribution. And I think the Jon Stewart clip sort of got into this, where, the kind of story of the last maybe 50 years of American history is a lot of promises about just around the corner there's this sort of technological utopia that, things are going to be painful for a little while, the society is going to shift around, but down the corner there's going to be more equality, more meaningful work for people, more leisure time, all these things. And I think that, the thing about any technology, which takes us back to where we started, is technology is, it's introduced into a human world and a human system and a human set of values. And so insofar as we have the kind of economy we have, the kind of government we have, the kind of people at the top of our political and economic system that we have, it's very likely that the technology, unless, we, humanity, do something different, it's very likely that the technology just kind of follows the same tracks, follows the same line of development, follows the helps increase the power of those at the top. And so, the sort of one of the horrific AI scenarios is the kind of techno bosses, oligarchs of the future, who sort of rule over a jobless populace. And I think that is not inevitable. Nothing about technology is inevitable, but that is a choice that humanity has to make. And I do not trust, I'll say, the current developers of AI technology to make that choice in a direction that benefits humanity as a whole.
Technology may not have a direction or motive or an end game, but capitalism does. So capitalism's needle is set at go make more money. However, right? The however only gets checked because we decide some things are unacceptable, right? We had a little bit of a conversation earlier about do trademarks and patents and things favor labor or capital, right? Because right now, the way the law is written, it's that you can't copyright something written by AI. You can't copyright an image made by AI because it's protecting labor. The test is how much did you work on it, right? And that might change over time, but right now we have decided as a government and as a people that we want to support labor in our evolution as a country. So we might change that decision, but it's built in, although technology is mostly in service of capitalism. So while technology itself doesn't have a true north, it's mostly used by capitalism, or used best maybe by capitalism.
Yeah, I have a prediction that I'm fairly confident about, which is that this technology will not provide anybody with loads more free time than they already have right now. Every transformative technology is generally sold as a time-saving device, and it never turns out to be so quickly. Like the washing machine, for example, was supposed to liberate women and was supposed to give them all this free time. They didn't have to do the washing; was going to take as long. It could do it in half an hour, and all that really happened was that cleanliness standards became higher, and now you have to do the washing machine 3 times a week as opposed to once a week before. And so whatever this technology does bring to us, I am pretty confident that free time will not be one of those things.
I hate to see where the goalposts of hygiene move next.
Well, and if I can just, the last thing on that is too, it's, it's not, if a corporation develops a labor productivity enhancing technology, it's not like all the workers can get together and say, okay, let's have now 30-hour weeks instead of 40-hour weeks. Our economy, our society is not designed for us together to make those kinds of decisions. Instead, who owns the technology, who the investors get to make the decisions about, well, okay, this means 5 people get laid off, or this means, we're gonna take this much more profit. We're gonna have the same work days and just have that much more profit and invest in other things. So I think it's you always wanna, when thinking about any technological development, it's who are the decision makers, who has the power to make those decisions, and that's why us having public conversations about, it doesn't have to be only a small set of people who make those decisions. We do sort of kind of have a democracy sometimes, and it's important that we have these conversations in a way where, we get to be in the driver's seat, both that the robots aren't in the driver's seat kind of vision, but I think actually more worrisomely that the tech oligarchs and venture capitalists aren't in the driver's seat.
Well, Jeremy used the word inevitable previously, which I really am interested in, that idea about how this kind of all seems to be inevitable. But Linda, you also brought up the point about, it's only inevitable when we don't stand up and say, hey, this is not, as a society, what we want. And part of the issue there is there's a transparency issue that I want to get into maybe in a minute, but where not the whole story is being revealed. It's very much a slick kind of marketing language that's being used around AI right now. So that made me think about the idea of agency. What level of agency does an individual user have in the face of a generative AI data set, or even after reading this story in the Times, what level of agency does the AI have, which was a little creepy. So I'll just read it. Anthropic has been the most vocal about its efforts to make synthetic data work. This was a story about synthetic data. It fine-tunes the second AI model using a, quote, constitution, unquote, curated by the company's researchers. This teaches the model to choose text that supports certain principles, such as freedom, equality, and a sense of brotherhood, or life, liberty, and personal security. Anthropic's method is known as constitutional AI. So this is essentially about two AIs talking to each other to generate new data that then will become a source for yet more AI. I wanted to give a shout out to Cade Metz, who went to my high school and now is a lead tech reporter at the New York Times. So, yeah, this issue of agency, you know, and kind of this idea of inevitability as well. I mean, I think, you know, how can we feel like we do have agency, and what are some strategies that we might use as perhaps a user of AI to you know, counter whether it's issues of bias or even subvert a constitution written by somebody that we don't know. Mark, you want to say something?
I kind of do.
Yeah.
So I'm not so worried about people in this room figuring out how to have agency when interacting with, you know, the current generation of generative AI, because, I mean, we're a bunch of artists and designers and people who think and write about art and design. And so we tend to have a pretty active and critical relationship with the tools we use. And for the most part, AIs do still feel very much like tools. But I don't know, how many of us here have played around with making images with like Stable Diffusion? Quite a few, right? So maybe this will feel familiar to you, but like I was playing around with uploading my own photographs and then adjusting different settings. There's all these different settings and models you can choose, and putting in different prompts and seeing what comes back. And it felt so radically different from any other tool I've ever, I was going to say used, but really interacted with. Different from a hammer, different from a saw, but also really different from a paintbrush or Photoshop, which tend to be pretty predictable, or to the extent that we learn to control them. But this felt really difficult to control, and I didn't have the sense that learning how to adjust the settings or to engineer prompts was going to give me more control. It continually would surprise me with the results. And you said, Frank, that it appears to be intelligent. It also kind of feels not quite intelligent. It doesn't feel intelligent like you feel intelligent to me, because obviously our intelligences are different, but they're of the same order. But it kind of felt
like it has a personality almost.
Yeah.
It has
Almost,
a point of view.
or something. And it also feels like it's nascent. I feel also like we're under the lights here, but I also feel like we're kind of groping in the dark at the dawn of this era. We're kind of, I don't want to be a technological determinist or say it's inevitable, but it seems like we may be at a kind of inflection point in human history.
There is a ghost in the machine. And when we work with it, the ghost says, I'm here.
Yeah.
It shows that it's there. We are, in the next 5 to 6 years, our society will change more than it has in the past 50 years because of these tools, simply because they're being incorporated into capitalistic workflow. So we're going to be forced to use them.
Mark, question for you. Did the novelty wear off, or when did you stop, or did you get bored?
Novelty didn't wear off. I finished the project and met the deadline and haven't circled back yet, although I fully expect to. And I'm really curious to see how Stable Diffusion, for example, has changed in the last few months. It was also fun. Like, I felt like I was in a kind of improvisatory collaboration with something that wasn't creative and intelligent, but felt like it was almost that. And so what then really got me thinking is that it became like a mirror for my own creativity, like holding up. So how is this like me? How is it different? And I realized that one of the big questions for us to answer as artists and designers is, what does it mean, or how does it change how we understand ourselves? What does it feel like to be in a world where we're constantly interacting with more or less intelligent, more or less sentient machines? And how does that change our understanding of what we are? I mean, certainly everyone who's ever spent time with an animal has had a kind of experience of, you understand a little bit more about what it means to be human as opposed to canine, for example. And this is a whole nother order of that. And unlike dogs, it's evolving really, really, really fast.
Also, don't you think it's intoxicating? It makes you feel powerful. It's like having a bunch of studio interns and you say, go give me 100, drafts of something, and then you just kind of shop them and say, make these better, or y'all make these better. And like who was saying in our prior conversation that it's one of the illustration professors that people don't know how much goes into making an illustration unless you've made them, right? So, you have to work really hard in your head. And if you can off-put that assignment from your head to the medium really fast, do you actually develop the same creative muscle as that when you have to actually, like, before you render this thing, because it takes so long, you have to actually visualize it hard. Like you have to concentrate. It's hard to concentrate. You might sketch it a little bit, but it's like sweating inside between your ears, right? And if you don't do that anymore, if you just say, let's throw it on the wall and see what it comes up with, and I'll pick one, I don't think you're developing the same muscle.
I agree, but also to circle back to the question about how we educate artists and how we as artists educate ourselves. I was having breakfast this morning and I saw this book on the shelf that I hadn't caught my eye in a while, and it's called The Art of Doing Nothing. And it's about artists who work with fabricators and artisans to make their work, which is nothing particularly new, but if you go to some of the really big blue chip and mega galleries in Chelsea, you're likely to see a lot of work that wasn't made by the hand of the artist. Now, is it important for a contemporary artist who works with fabricators to manufacture their work that they have those skills that they were trained to see by learning to draw? Or can they start out as sort of conceptual artists who, as Solowit famously said, have ideas that are like machines that make the work and the execution's a perfunctory affair? You can outsource it to, a fabrication shop today, later on an AI connected to a robotic, digital printing fab lab.
But how can we locate the kind of, thinking, kind of hard-won, analytical process that, Linda was talking about, the sweating between your ears, kind of problem solving through making. And that seems to be an important aspect of what we do, whether you're an artist, designer, or writer. Part of the process of going through it, which is sometimes just horribly painful, and you often hear writers say how much they hate writing, and like they're professional writers, and because it is it's hard work, and but it is a critical in the sense of key part of that process of connecting dots in your mind in a way that only you would do it.
And I think, sorry, just really quickly, I think it's also, if it's a given that right now technology and our tools are transforming at a tremendous and rapid pace, it's like also sort of essential that human beings be more than their tools, insofar as like, if you're not, like if you're a very well-trained monkey operating a certain tool, in 10 years that tool may be totally irrelevant and totally forgotten by history. And so imagine if you were like a person trained only in how to do, if all you thought about your work as, say, a designer were design tools, and you were the last person to go through school right before the computer was introduced, then, if you were nothing but your tools, if you were trained to be nothing but adept at a specific tool, that is, both on a human sense kind of problematic, but also on a ability to survive the kind of rapid pace of change in our society, problematic also. That's actually not preparing for the next 60 years of your life.
It kind of builds on what Mark was saying and what Jeremy was saying. But I kind of also have a mini theory that which can be done easily by AI, the value of that will go to zero, right? If it's going to be so easy to create images or text, then the value of that is not going to be very high. How could it be? And so I think to answer your question about how do we create value in this new age, I think either you're doing something like the process that Mark is engaging with, where you're trying to find these new formative ways of creating something interesting, unique, compelling with the tool, or you're somewhere else entirely, right? You're disbanded with the tool, and you're creating something that does not look like it came from a tool. And I think there are very viable futures for both of those paths, and I think the market will also help determine that. I think that the market will very quickly see that which can be easily done by AI is not going to hold much value to anybody, is my thought at least. And so I think you'll kind of be back where we are right now, which is basically if it's so easy, everybody would do it, and who's going to want that?
If I just one other brief thing too, just on the question of sort of how widespread we expect this to transform our society, I do think, again, a sort of agentive, to get back to the agency question, I do think a question that I think my sense from teaching that people are particularly sensitive to, and that this generation is much more sensitive to in the way that previous generations should have been, is questions of the environment and environmental impact and the environmental impact of these tools. And I do think the question of how we do or do not limit our use of these tools should be based on our consciousness of where the planet is heading and the question of climate change. And that, unfortunately, previous generations basically didn't ask those questions about their tools, and we've landed in a place. But I do think part of my confidence in some ways that, young people today, y'all Zoomers or what have you, are going to be, are going to be critically engaged with these tools in ways previous generations may not have been with other technologies, is precisely because you have a kind of, unfortunately, maybe you've had to develop a kind of planetary consciousness, thinking about the future of the species that, maybe less my generation, but certainly previous generations, I think, could kind of be like, well, it'll all work out in the end. The end is a kind of live question for you all, I think.
Yeah, well, that's actually a perfect segue, because I wanted to move into issues of transparency and intellectual property. And I think with regard to the environmental questions and impacts, that's certainly an aspect of using generative AI that is really not as transparent as it needs to be right now, in terms of just the amount of energy used, but also the extractions of rare minerals for processors, and also rechargeable batteries, of course. So accounting for those impacts, the acres of data centers and the water used to cool the processors is something that I think needs attention. It's a whole other topic of discussion that warrants its own conversation, I think. But to bring transparency around to thinking about issues of ethics, and from the perspective of SVA as an institution, I wanted to talk to Frank and refer back to one of the video clips, and I wanted to invoke this program called Nightshade, which was mentioned, which was described as a poison pill for AI. That is, if an AI tries to use it, the results will be illegible for the user and ostensibly for other AI. So, how does this work, and can it be a effective tool, do you think, to maintain control?
There are several tools out there. One developed at researchers at University of Chicago called Glaze and Nightshade. And they basically, what they do is
They're great
they
names, by the way. Aren't they great?
Yeah.
Glaze, it's like brilliant.
Yeah, glaze. And what it does is you run your artwork through the app, the Glaze app or the Nightshade app, and then when it gets scraped by an AI search engine or somebody using AI, what it does is it distorts the imagery. So, for lack of a better phrase, it's spoiling the milk. And it's a methodology, it's a method, a process whereby you protect the value of your work or you prevent somebody from using your work in a way that you don't want to do it. You don't want them to use it to train an AI engine.
It works like a digital watermark?
It's sort of like a watermark.
No?
No, not really, because it doesn't show a mark. What it does is it
Well,
actually...
watermarking technology is embedding information in the image that's not visible, but that's
Yeah,
machine
but
It sounds like it corrupts it.
Yeah. Glaze and Nightshade, it corrupts the image for the AI.
And that's a great point, because all of this is going to happen. People are going
Right.
to mess with it. Like the AI that is self-driving vehicles, which we don't have yet either. Couriers learned that if they run in front of, ride their bike in front of an AI vehicle, it must stop. So they don't wait for a break in the traffic anymore. They look for the thing on top of the car and they go in front of it, and it has to stop, which kind of
The
screws
Luddites
up.
have their day, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what people are going to do, especially if they lose their jobs.
Right. The only country in the world where fully self-driving cars is going to work is Singapore, because they obey the law there. As soon as somebody knows that the car is going to stop, they're going to walk in front of it. In New York City, can you imagine if you had a self-driving car? You'd be there for a week.
Now I want them.
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking in defense of the Luddites. I like the Luddites. They get a bad rap, you know? No, I'm not a Luddite, but I think they had their moment. And there's a good reason that people, when they see tools that are threatening their livelihoods, their survival, that they are like, wait a minute, stop that.
So let's take this to the issue of copyright. And an artist creates something and they want to protect their ownership rights in the work, the value of the work they've created, whether they market it or not, whether they choose to monetize it, or as we say in the law business, exploit it. They can run it through Glaze, they can run it through Nightshade, but then the issue becomes, is AI-generated work protectable? If you're creating work and then you modify it through AI, is it now protectable? Can it be done? The Copyright Office has a policy paper out, a position paper out, that they will grant copyright to an AI-created work provided there's enough human intervention or guidance or creative input to the work. When AI first came out, people tried to file copyright applications in the name of the AI, and they're rejected. And the Copyright Office is very, very frank about this. If you look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the U.S. Constitution, the intent is to protect artists, give them exclusive rights over their work, artists and craftspeople, exclusive rights over their work as an incentive to create more. Following that position, the Copyright Office has taken the position that a human must be deeply involved in the creation of AI work in order for copyright to attach, which I think is good. I think it's right.
So to think about this issue of IP a little bit more broadly, in addition to the watermarks or the possibility for that, what about citing of sources? I'm kind of thinking of specifically my experience with the text-oriented chatbots and AIs. Sometimes I know there are AIs that are starting to work towards citing sources, but there's a accuracy problem apparently. I mean, it's having trouble being quite accurate, and so there's a misinformation issue in play. These are sometimes called hallucinations, euphemistically, in the AI realm, where AI connects the dots in a wacky way that for us would be considered incorrect. So From my perspective as a journalist, it kind of makes me feel queasy because fact checking is such a critical aspect of what we do, and it relates to media credibility and then reader trust as well. Again, a whole other subject for another day. But I really want to talk about for educators or students who are engaging with AI-generated content. What kind of sourcing transparency do we want to see from the AI side?
Lots. I mean, basically disclose, right? Cite. Our policy in MFA Fine Arts is you can use it as long as you acknowledge that you're using it. And there's lots of different ways to do that. At the bottom of the slide, you can say written in collaboration with or written with, Bard, or I guess it's now called Gemini, which is the Google version of ChatGPT. One challenge, though, and it's the same with straight-up old-fashioned plagiarism, is in a very diverse and international student community, it can be hard for all the students to really understand what these policies are. So it seems like there's a lot of unintentional violations, people not really realizing what they are and aren't allowed to do, which stems from all kinds of just not only communication barriers, but different educational systems and the values that they put on originality versus imitation or regurgitation.
I actually do think this is spelled out pretty clearly in the current academic integrity policy that we have, and that's pretty common amongst institutions. It's thou shalt not plagiarize. Copy and paste is basically that. So I don't know that there's new ground here necessarily, even though it seems very new.
Yeah, and I think the sort of, this goes back to, Eric, what you were saying earlier, kind of like the personal question, too, is sort of like, asking all of us and asking students and asking for any of our own work, our own artwork, our own writing, our own thinking, like, does it feel like it's mine? And if it stops feeling like it's yours, if we reach that level of sort of alienation, that's like the sort of personal end of what Frank is saying. The government says, well, if we're going to give you a copyright, it should be yours in some sense. We can see how much labor went into it, et cetera. That's like, I think, a kind of human, personal question we can ask too.
Good artists imitate, great artists steal.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
attributed and misattributed to lots and lots of different, artists and writers. But just one little anecdote before we move on. So I'm seeing AI-generated material not only in work that to which our academic integrity policies would apply, like assignments, but emails I'm getting from applicants. So sometimes there's back and forth emails between applicants and department staff around things like, say, scholarships, and I'm pretty sure that I'm getting appeals that were not written by the applicant alone. And that's just, so I just was like, okay, this is a tip of the iceberg. When am I gonna get my first email from Chris that was written in collaboration with, because, it's already being built into certain, I don't know which next version of Microsoft Outlook will start composing emails for us, but if it's not already with us, it will be, by Thursday.
I'm currently working on some proposals for a PhD application and some other work, and a proposal for integrating AI into processes here at SVA and pedagogy at SVA. And in doing the research, I asked for citations, and 100% of the citations I got were fake.
Wow.
100%. And then I entered this swamp of trying to find real citations, and then I found journals that existed only with one article in them. Somebody created a journal just so they could say they were published in a journal. And it's really important to understand, what I do if I use AI. Not only do I write that it was what AI engine I used, I also include the date I filed it, I used it, and I include a copy of my prompt so that it knows what I asked it, when I asked it, and what engine I asked it of. And this circling back around to the creation of artwork and this feeling of there's something there, but it's not there. You can sculpt the way these engines work by the way you ask the question. It's really much more interactive than we understand. You can shape how it outputs. You can put guardrails. You can ask ChatGPT to be an expert in education. Now, I wish to put together a program for incorporating AI into education at a college level institution. What questions should I ask? That was my prompt. I didn't say, tell me how to do it. I asked it to tell me what questions I should ask. And what it does is it goes and looks at all the literature and gives me a set of questions to ask. And then I drill down on those.
Can I just ask Mark really quick? Mark, how did those appeals that you felt were generated algorithmically make you feel? And did you feel like less inclined to grant?
Well, my decision process on the appeals isn't very subjective. And I just kind of chuckled. I mean, in fact, it was probably better written than it would have been otherwise. And I'm not really that concerned in this case about how well students can write correspondence with.
But you might if they were applying to law school, for example.
Or writing you a love letter.
Yeah.
That's true. How does co-creation work in a love letter?
Can I just, one other thing I wanted just to circle us back to the initial point about what intelligence is, what human intelligence is. And it does seem like the ability to distinguish truth from lies or truth from fiction is really important for what human intelligence is, and something that these machines can't do. And, of course, part of maybe the interesting thing about art is that it tries to get at truth through the medium of fiction or through the medium of lies. But that still relies on some sort of distinction between them. And I think, and truth it's both about like knowing, having some reason to believe what you're believing, knowing the sources, knowing the evidence, being able to weigh the evidence, making judgments, all these things, which, again, the AI does not, at least as it currently stands, but maybe will never be able to do. But the other sense, I think, is also, again, to take us back to the climate change question, truth is sort of a question of like values of what cuts through. It seems to me like the truth of our time is that nothing matters more than climate change, and nothing matters more than saving the species. And that's like, that involves a set of judgments and a set of ideas and a set of conclusions that are all just so much a part of our functioning as human beings.
If I may, just one more little
word,
tag onto that. When you were speaking, I was reminded of Frank's survey and the 39% of respondents who said they trusted AI. I was really thinking, if I were taking that survey, I might have said I trust it, but what I really mean by that is I trust myself to use it with enough critical skepticism to sort of detect what is truthy or relevant or reliable or helpful to me and what's not. So maybe they're not blindly trusting. Maybe they're trusting their judgment.
It could be. I think that what you're stating is there's a higher level of reasoning and a higher level of logic there. And I apologize to all the the freshmen here, but it takes a while to develop that set of skills. So right now, I'm a Homo sapien. I like to do it the easy way, if at all possible, right? And I think when you're presented with a tool that will let you take a shortcut, the temptation is to take the shortcut. And that's what part of what I think we need to do is we need to inculcate this notion of ethics and procedure and policy, and make sure that people understand that the goal is to make you a better artist. It's not to be a stricter person. It's not for me to be your dad. It's for you to be a better artist.
And as David Rose would say, a better citizen as well. Yeah.
And I did see, just briefly, I saw some of the shocked faces at the making up citations point you made, Frank. So I think I think it's also partly, we started
those are all the people who are using it.
Yeah. We started this conversation talking about, the ways human intelligence is like different, but also I think sort of by implication, a number of us were saying in some sense qualitatively better, qualitatively other, but actually our experience with technology often is that the technology seems superior to us, and so you see something on a screen, you see a citation on it could just be, back 10 years ago, just Wikipedia or on a website or whatever, and it appears to have a kind of like authority, like, oh, well, that's the citation. There it is. Like me with my puny human brain don't know the citation, but the website does. And I think that's really important too. Like we have to kind of continually remind ourselves that like these are just made by people and have some dubious holes in them with that.
Well, thank you. We need to start to wrap up. But yeah, thank you, Jeremy, for bringing us back around to the beginning and, the idea of learning. I think in thinking about that kind of question in the classroom setting and the question of, crisis or opportunity with AI, one thing that came to my mind was a class that Steve Heller taught in our department that got the nickname No Google. It was a research and writing class, but he stipulated, this was like back in 2010, that students could not use Google search to do the research for this particular project, which was ruffled feathers, but the students. I think it was done on the honor system, of course, but largely got into it, went out, pounded the pavement, actually talked to a real live research librarian, went to an archive, and I think discovered had a much more gratifying learning experience than they would have otherwise. And so, Steve let me know yesterday he's ready to do the no Gen AI version of the course anytime. But I just want to do kind of a lightning round, back to the title for like a last word, last comment, quick reflection for all the panelists. Crisis opportunity.
Yes.
Okay, Jeremy, next.
Ooh, I'd say same old, maybe. There's nothing new under the sun is my concern.
What about you, Frank?
It's a crisis if you just let it lead you. It's an opportunity if you control it, if you understand it, if you understand how to make it work for you. And that takes a little doing, but it's doable, at least for my students, or else.
What about you, Linda?
I grew up loving technology, but I'm going to say crisis. I mean, personally, it's really fun, and I use it, and I get it, and I like it. But we know so much now about how these things enter our world and what happens to them and what happens to us as a result. And I don't think we can look at this technology in 2024 like we looked at something in 2000. We get what's going on now. Like even your point about training it on, respecting freedom. Whose definition of freedom? Exactly. Where's all the Wittgensteinians in here? Because all of this is supposed to be contextual. And is it my freedom from or my freedom to? Whose version of freedom? How do you teach it that?
Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to pretend it knows that and unleash it. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody needs to be vigilant if you want to protect what you care about, including your careers and your joys. Because I'll tell you one thing, I'll make a prediction right now, which is you better be really good. You have to be way better than you had to be 10 years ago. Because it's going to go either you're fantastic or you're a commodity. And all these people who don't enjoy doodling, like our front row, they just want the illustration. They don't want to put in the work. They don't want to make it into a passion or a career. They just want something. And they're going to use it. And they're going to flood the zone. So you need to be better.
But I love what you were saying until you went on that like scare everybody that they have to be so fantastic.
I think it's true. It's hollowed out the middle of everything. Technology's hollowed out so many things.
And the contextual and all that. But
all right, I'm going to jump in. Right. You guys can take this outside. Eric, Eric, you next.
Yeah, very, very quickly. So yeah, I do think crisis for some, opportunity for others. If it's, if you kind of fall into the crosshairs of what this technology can do really well, that's not going to be great for you. But I think there are going to be a lot of different ways for people to distinguish themselves from this technology, either by getting, if it's your thing, to get really good at it and kind of make it your own, that's great for you. That'll be one way. But I think that there will be a very large segment for people who are successfully able to kind of differentiate themselves. The market will always want different and will always want new, innovative, and something that stands out from the rest. So try to do that.
Hence the fantastic.
And if my brief Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, just to say, I think that's just a question of if, all signs point to things continuing as they are and it just exacerbating existing dynamics. But on the other hand, there's things could be quite different. That is up to us. It's up to the people in this room and the rest of humanity.
Exactly. And so I will take the opportunity to have the last word here and say, I think it's a crisis and an opportunity. So I would copy edit the slide to actually say that we change or for and keep talking. So with that, I think, thank you. We can give a round of applause to our panelists for their excellent conversation. And then I think we have some time to take a few questions from the audience. If we have anybody who'd like to ask something to our panelists. I think we have a couple of, at least one mic down here. There is another over here. If you could come down and ask a question.
So come on over to one of the mics on either side.
All right, Ida.
Can you hear me on that? Yeah. I felt really passionate about this question until the closing comments, so I'm going to politely ignore the closing comments and ask the question anyway. I'm curious about what responsibility and techniques you all feel that us as educators owe to our students, given the world that they are entering. I have dramatically changed how I teach, and I also expect a lot more of my students. But I'm eagerly looking for other folks, other teachers who are attempting the same, because we certainly haven't figured this out yet.
I'm happy to take that first. I totally agree. I have also changed how I teach. I also expect more from my students. The bar has kind of gone up in some regard. I personally, if somebody hands in something that I feel, first of all my assignments, I type into ChatGPT to see what a low effort, response would give. Low effort students, by the way, tend to use low effort prompts, and they become very easy to detect. And so that's one thing that I do categorically. Second thing, if I detect this, if I think that a student is using these tools and it's not interesting, then I will just put that in the comments and I'll say, it seems to me like X, like this, and this, and this came from here. Is that the case? I put them on the defensive, and I will grade that response low.
I guess I want to challenge your whole approach because it sounds remedial. And I just think these tools offer something way more than that. So I would rather assume way more of my students in the most positive possible light, that we are actually collaborators and doing something awesome with this, and not taking a remedial mindset to try and catch them in something.
I hear
That's
that.
not my go-to place.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of different approaches, right? So there's the catch, the try and the catch part, which I think a lot of our energy is focused on. Is kind of the first place to go to. Now, in terms of the more substantive, how do we use these tools to grow into better thinkers? From my part, also, I will ask students sometimes to, okay, here's your response. Interesting. Did you put that through a chatbot? Ask it to find weaknesses in your argument. Can you do that? How would you respond? That's one easy kind of go-to thing that I've been doing.
One of the things that I've been doing is I feel a great obligation to make sure I'm educated. I understand not only the technology, but understand how the tools can be used. And then what I want to do, what I have been doing, is passing that on to my students in that this is how you can use the tool effectively. Because I know that they will be asked in their job interview, do you know how to do this? And I want them to be able to say yes and have some modicum of skill, so that, and then they can use that. They will learn to use that in a better way, better than I can ever conceive, and they will learn to use those tools effectively and richly.
I think it doesn't hurt to explain all of this, because the idea that you have a creative muscle that you're investing in over your entire lifetime, that's on you. That's your responsibility to yourself, your success, whatever. And if you don't respect that there's some value in doing things the hard way, you're just not going to get as good. They're even reintroducing longhand in a lot of schools because they've learned that kids learn better, their brains sharpen faster.
Why are we always assuming that using AI is the easier way?
Because
I'm not sure that that's actually the most productive
It feels easier
assumption.
to me. I
But
use it.
So then what is the hard thing you can do now that you couldn't do before?
I think you have to learn to draw. You have to
research.
learn to see. You have to write drafts. You have to struggle over your language. You have to refine your arguments.
Right,
You
and
have to
so
do
also
that.
like hearing you talk about longhand as a student who is dyslexic and has ADHD and who was publicly humiliated before my first grade class because I could not spell, I want every kid to have access to a computer and to learn to type as well, if not before they learn to write longhand. And so again, this assumption that the technology is the easy thing, I don't know why we are bringing that assumption to this conversation.
I think it's complex. I think it really depends on the person. I would say that one other thing, I think where Linda started too was just that the ethical, political, for me, part of the work is to reaffirm the meaning of a college education, which is a space to talk through, where the hell do we want society to go? What is the meaning of life, of our work, of who we're going to be as people? And that, I think AI is just encouraging us to have those conversations. Again, what is integrity? What does it mean for my work to be my own? And what does it mean for humans to interact with tools? All these questions are perfect questions to ask in college classes, but too often questions that we have so much to get through. We have to that we kind of shunt aside sometimes. And so I think it's a call for us to all engage in those conversations, and for us as professors to prioritize those conversations.
I'm with her.
Yeah.
I have ADHD. I'm dyslexic. I suck at math because the numbers move around. And I'll be perfectly frank, I'm on Ritalin right now, because it lets me work effectively. It's a tool.
But one size doesn't fit all for all the neurodiverse people. We have to adjust tools and approaches and our own, how we deal with ourselves, whatever. That's not going to go away.
Yeah,
Throw
I'm
a
just
wee little
gonna.
wrench in the works of the answers. Sorry.
I want to move on to take some more questions, but I do want to acknowledge the point that Ida is making and demonstrating too, that we're all kind of currently plugging in to AI at really different levels and places. As I said, I'm sort of novice level. Ida, I know this is something you've been, a field you've been working in, and we could probably learn a lot from what you're doing in the classroom. So I just want to acknowledge that sort of, there's a real spectrum of a lot of different things.
One
happening.
last word. If I can do it, anybody in this room can do it.
All right, let's take a question from this side, please.
Sure. I wanted to react to 2 points that were made during the discussion and then kind of ask the same question about both of those points. One had to do with, you were talking about the ghost in the machine and how when you interact with it and give it prompts, that sometimes AI does things that you don't expect, and it's almost like interacting with something that has its own personality. And as I understand it, part of the reason it feels that way is because when you type a prompt into AI, invisibly in the background, it edits your prompt, it rewrites it, and it changes it to give it what it thinks you want in spite of what you asked for. So if you say, I want a video of woolly mammoths running across a tundra, it will add mountains because it will think probably they want mountains. So the implication there is that obviously that's an innocuous example, but you extrapolate that out across the entirety of AI, and what it means is that it's subtly manipulating you at a level below your awareness. And so my question is, about that, why would any creative person, why would any artist want to make their work on a tool that is subtly manipulating you in ways that you are not aware of?
Because that's really interesting.
And another point is that the other point I want to react to is about, you were saying, who's the product here? If you interact with a tool that's free or really, really cheap, who is actually, and that you are the product. And, with AI, it's not just simply taking your images or your ideas that you're typing into it. It's, when you interact with it, it's learning how you think. And you are training it to think the way you think. You're making it more sophisticated every time you interact with it. You're training it. And it's studying how you make creative decisions and the way you create, so that it can duplicate it and use the way you think and the way you create, so that someone else can do it without you and make money without you. So again, why would any creative person want to give that away for free?
Addressing the first issue, it's really not manipulating you. What you're seeing or what's happening, it's an artifact of the training. What it's doing is when you type in a word, it's predicting the next word. And it assigns the word is tokenized, and it's predicting the next token. And then when you want an image from your prompt, what's happening is it's doing its best guess. Now, right now, it seems to be manipulating you, subtly manipulating you. It will get better, but it doesn't address that doesn't address the underlying issue. Why would an artist want to work with a machine? In other words, I'm a firm believer that if you understand how to shape your prompt, you can manipulate the machine.
But if you're not in total control of the prompt,
you're writing it. You're writing the prompt.
no, it's rewriting it in the background.
No,
You
it
can't
isn't.
see
It is not rewriting it.
It does have, like, even if you just switch the order of the prompt, the output will change. So, and I think I agree with Mark here, which is, it's interesting because it's like having a creative partner who surprises you and maybe pushes you outside your comfort zone in a way that it might be terrible, but it might make you think of something else. So,
I do think our dear questioner has a wonderful point, though, or important point. I mean, machine learning is also used a lot in social media to determine what, it feeds us based on what we've looked at before. So Instagram Reels and TikTok and, every other platform we interact with, those I think are also manipulating us in a way that, it's manipulating our desires, our consciousness, it's neuroplasticity.
Amazon
plus,
recommendations.
Yeah, right. So maybe this is another permutation of that.
Definitely.
You're describing artifacts of bad programming, poor programming, and it will get better. But your underlying question is really, really significant. Why does an artist want to work with these things? You need to control it.
But I do think any artist should recognize, and Eric brought this up earlier, it's possible, and especially given, I had a discussion with students about some of these matters a few months ago, and they were like, given the ethical issues of stealing artists' works, there's just, we're not interested in touching it. And maybe come 2 years from now, like when those ethical issues have changed, maybe we can talk about it. Like, I do think there are, it's really important to think about what are the lines we have for, and where are we making compromises, and being very self-conscious about the compromises we're making. So like, training the tools, becoming kind of a free worker for the tools, given the economic consequences, is not great, and is maybe a compromise one's willing to make for possible gains, but like, we shouldn't negotiate our way out of like some of the damage that our activities are actually doing in the world.
All right. Thank you for that great question. This side of the room, please go ahead.
I just wanted to circle back to when you were talking about shortcuts. And I wanted to ask if you think that it's fair to say that AI companies capitalize on our laziness, and if that is a positive or a negative in the long run.
Was that for a particular person?
For anybody.
Well, the short answer is they're training. They want to train their models. And in the beginning, they just scraped whatever they could get. They scraped everything written. They scraped every image they could find on the internet. And we've slapped their hands. They've been hauled before Congress. And now we're realizing, number one, what they did was engage in gross infringement, copyright infringement. And number two, they engaged in a surreptitious but really, really nasty piece of theft, stealing the value of artwork they found, stealing the value of written works that they found, all for the purpose of making the model better. So,
which is for the purpose of eventually being able to sell you stuff, most likely.
yeah, make money.
Yeah.
But your question
Not
was
sure
about
that's your question.
our laziness, the user's
Yeah,
laziness?
like our laziness.
I mean, yeah, definitely, right? Like, I think people in general have a tendency to take the path of least resistance in general, in all courses, in all walks of life, and you often have to have a good reason not to do that, or be very consciously choose not to take the path of least resistance. And that is definitely true with this tool, and it's definitely true in learning in particular, right? So, my personal, as an educator, if a student wants to take a shortcut and they want to use AI, they might, and I can detect that, that rubs against my kind of like integrity as an educator. But ultimately, that's the student's choice, and they get to decide what their level of engagement is in their own formation. So, yeah, shortcuts will eventually probably not pay off, although that is to be determined. So,
It's hard for me to compute that question. Sorry.
It's also not just for you or us, because a lot of people, I'm sure you guys have all experienced it. I wish I could draw like you. People are a little bit envious of some of these creative skills and gifts, and they want to play. They want to use it too. They want to be able to make something they can see here, but they don't know how to do this, right? So a lot of what you're going to see is creativity that's been unleashed by people who, in the past didn't have easy access to some kind of output. And there's going to be a lot of it, because that's most everybody.
What's kind of tragic, though, is that happens at the same time that we're, say, cutting arts programs out of public schools. And, i.e., again, those who has access to the means of basic creative expression are political and social choices.
I just don't very much personally identify with this whole notion of laziness. I mean, art just doesn't feel like a lazy thing to do. It's almost the opposite of laziness.
But I think,
don't artists always seem to take the hard way? What?
Yeah, I think if I may.
No, I know, but it's just like okay.
Well, I think the question was about low effort prompts.
Yeah, more like passivity.
Oh, I see.
And like everybody overall in general, not just only specifically artists, but people who do it to try to make art. Like you were saying, how people that can't draw or do any of that, paint, whatever it is, they use that to try to do it. And is that laziness? Is that blocking them from finding what they're good at and how they could output what they want to output without having to put a pencil and paper to draw?
All right, well, thank you for that great question. Something to chew on, for sure. We have one more questioner who's been waiting for a while. We'll take that as the last question.
So technology will keep evolving, and AI, just like with the invention of, like, for example, photography, is a new tool that we as artists have to use. So how, as a school, will you how would you incorporate, what would you say is the right way to incorporate art into our AI into teaching, and like bringing it into the classroom? What would you say is the correct way to use it?
Oh,
Eric, you wanna take it?
Great question. I think that I can think of a lot of good ways in which to incorporate it. I just think that those ways haven't quite been invented yet. So, just for example, if somebody is writing a response and they write that, George Washington was the 11th president of the United States, it would be great for AI to come in and say, actually, hey, here's a little bit of information about that. Here, let me make you smarter. They're not quite at that level yet. And I do think that these tools will evolve to get us to that point where they become ways in which they are actually helping us learn and correct any kind of gaps or weaknesses that may pre-exist. But since we're not there yet, and since you're asking this question now and we are here today, I think that the ways in which you incorporate into the classroom, this is going to sound a little strange, but they have to be like non-derivative. And what I mean by that is like thinking of new and unique ways of using this technology that are generating non-consensus responses. Like the way that it's typically used, which I don't think is particularly useful, is in generating the consensus narrative. Like if you ask the AI what is art, right, it's going to give you a very, I think, thorough definition, right? But
flat.
But yeah, very flat and kind of like if you were to somehow mathematically average the sum of all these of all the questions about what all the answers that have been given about what is art, like it gives you the sum average of that, and that the value of that has gone to zero, to be very low, like the consensus answer for me at least. And so I'm interested in things that are not that. I'm interested in what can you bring to the table. I'm interested in like how is this technology going to force you to become more creative because now that answer is boring, if that makes any sense.
From my perspective, I'm already incorporating it into my teaching, and I want to, number one, give students the tools so that they understand what it is, how it works, and how they can use it. And then more importantly, not only are they using it, but what are the ethical implications of the use of the AI? And in forming prompts, there are ethical implications in the way you ask the question. If you ask the question looking for bias, you're going to get the bias back. So it's really important that people understand the power of their word when they're putting something into one of these engines.
Here's an idea for like a drawing class. Have a student make a drawing, put it into any of the image generators in image-to-image mode, and then use the AI to generate a new drawing and then draw that. So you end up with a drawing that you made with this sort of AI in between. That might be a way to get people to engage with it in a way that isn't cheating by any means. And that
Copying the computer output? Is that what you're talking about?
well, so
Pencil? What are you saying?
I'm not going to repeat it.
Okay.
If you didn't get
Well,
it, sorry.
I didn't get it the first time. We shouldn't discuss it.
All right, yeah. So you.
Telling a bunch of artists to input into a computer a drawing they made with their hand, and then when it comes out, draw that.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah.
Is that what you said? Am I
Yeah.
getting you correctly?
You got it.
Thank you.
Your problem?
Drawing Super Mario characters, that already existed before, and was something that existed for years before I was born, and then I just started drawing the characters and copying exactly how it was drawn. I think.
Here you go.
No, it's just a thought.
Putting prompts in and thinking that, sorry, I wanted to go off of what you said and what you were saying, like artists aren't lazy and creative people aren't lazy because they're driven to figure out a way to create, and that's why they're creatives. And you saying like differentiating creative people and normal people from just playing around with AI and then people who are using it, I think it's similar to a child drawing fan art of like a video game or of a character in a TV show and then, you're drawing photos of people or you're drawing things like that. These are all like references that the computer is collecting as well. And specifying the prompt and getting the same image out twice is near impossible. You won't be able to do that. The videos, the new technology that has come out, Sora, it's almost near impossible to get the same exact video with the same lighting, style, any sort of thing with the specificity of the quality of image 2 times in a row. And people will not be replaced by this. This is impossible with the amount of images that it is collecting from. And it's the same amount of images that we are collecting from as well and that we are being shown. It is just distorting it and giving it back to us distorted, which we already do.
All right. Well, we have to wrap up, unfortunately. Obviously, there's a lot more to talk about, but humans still seem to be in the mix, which is a plus, in my opinion. So Yes, so again, thank you to the panelists. I'll go forward to say thank you, everybody. Thank you to the audience for sticking around. And appreciate you all coming out tonight.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Molly.